There are moments in life when an opportunity doesn't knock twice. It appears in front of you quietly without warning and asks you to make a choice. You have 24 hours to accept my offer. Not because I want to pressure you, but because some decisions have a window, and when that window closes, the moment may never return. So before you say yes or no, take a breath, forget the noise, and ask yourself one simple question. What could change if you chose to take the chance? Sometimes life puts a decision in front of you without giving you the comfort of endless time. There is no perfect moment. There is no guarantee that everything will feel right. There is only the moment you are standing in, the choice in front of you, and the quiet voice inside asking what you really want. You have 24 hours to accept my offer. 24 hours may sound like a short amount of time, but sometimes a single day is enough to reveal what years of hesitation have been hiding. I am not asking you to make a reckless decision. I am asking you to be honest with yourself. There is a difference. Recklessness ignores the consequences. Honesty looks at them clearly and still asks whether the opportunity is worth taking. Sometimes we spend so much time protecting ourselves from disappointment that we also protect ourselves from possibility. We build walls, call them wisdom, and then wonder why nothing new can reach us. Think about how many moments in your life were lost because you told yourself you would decide later. Later became tomorrow, tomorrow became next week became next year, and eventually the opportunity disappeared not because you rejected it, but because you never answered it at all. Silence can be a decision too, waiting can be a decision too, and sometimes the most expensive decision you can make is refusing to choose while life continues moving forward. You have 24 hours. That does not mean you have 24 hours to become fearless. Nobody becomes fearless on command. Fear may still be there, doubt may still be there, questions may still be there. What matters is whether those feelings get to control the direction of your life. Courage is not the absence of uncertainty. Courage is being uncertain and still being willing to take one honest step forward. Maybe you are wondering what happens if you accept. Maybe you are imagining everything that could go wrong. That is natural. The mind has a strange habit of creating entire disasters from possibilities that have not happened yet. We rehearse failure before we have even given ourselves a chance to succeed. We imagine rejection, regret, embarrassment, loss, and disappointment, but we rarely give equal attention to the possibility that something could actually work. What if this is the moment you have been waiting for without realizing it? What if the door in front of you is not perfect, but it leads somewhere you have never been? What if the uncertainty you feel is not a warning to stop, but a reminder that you are stepping outside the life you already know? Growth rarely feels completely comfortable. New beginnings rarely arrive with complete instructions. You have 24 hours to accept my offer. That is the time available. But the deeper question is not really about the clock. It is about what you believe your future deserves. Do you believe your future deserves another chance? Do you believe you are allowed to change direction? Do you believe that something better can exist beyond the boundaries of what you have already experienced? There are people who spend years waiting for certainty before they move. They want every answer before they ask the first question. They want guarantees before they take the first step. They want to know exactly where the road ends before they begin walking. But life does not work that way. Most meaningful journeys begin with incomplete information. You take a step, learn something, take another step, and slowly the path becomes visible. You don't need to know everything tonight. You don't need to understand every detail. You don't need to predict every consequence. You only need to decide whether this opportunity deserves a real chance. Sometimes that is the entire battle. Not knowing what will happen, but deciding that you are willing to find out. And maybe there is another reason this decision feels so heavy. Maybe accepting this offer means leaving something behind. Maybe it means leaving an old version of yourself behind. The version that always waited. The version that always needed approval. The version that believed every mistake would define the rest of your life. The version that confused familiarity with safety. Familiarity can feel safe, but familiar does not always mean good. A familiar room can still be too small. A familiar routine can still keep you trapped. A familiar fear can still prevent you from discovering what you are capable of becoming. Sometimes you have to step away from what you know in order to meet the person you could become. You have 24 hours. Use them well. Don't spend them asking everyone else what they would do. Listen to advice, but remember that other people are not the ones who have to live your life. They will give you opinions based on their experiences, their fears, their expectations, and their understanding of the world. But your decision belongs to you. Ask yourself what you want when nobody is watching. Ask yourself what you would choose if you were not afraid of being judged. Ask yourself whether you are saying no because you truly don't want this, or because you are afraid of what saying yes might require from you. There is a powerful difference between rejection and fear. Sometimes your heart says no because something is wrong. Sometimes your mind says no because something is unfamiliar. Learn to tell those voices apart. One may be protecting your values. The other may simply be protecting your comfort. You don't have to prove anything to anyone by accepting this offer, and you don't have to prove anything by refusing it. The goal is not to choose the answer that looks impressive. The goal is to choose the answer that is honest. If you say yes, let it be because you see possibility. If you say no, let it be because you know this is not your path. But don't let hesitation make the decision for you. 24 hours can pass quietly. Morning becomes afternoon, afternoon becomes evening, the sky changes, people continue with their lives, messages arrive, conversations happen. The world does not stop while you decide. And then suddenly the final hour appears, reminding you that time never negotiates. That is why this moment matters. Not because 24 hours is magical, but because deadlines expose what we keep postponing. When there is unlimited time, we tell ourselves we will decide eventually. When time becomes limited, we are forced to confront what we actually feel. Maybe you have been waiting for someone to give you permission. Maybe you have been waiting for someone to tell you that you are ready. But readiness is often misunderstood. You may never feel completely ready. You may never wake up one morning with zero fear and perfect confidence. Sometimes readiness simply means that you are willing to begin, despite the uncertainty. Think about every important chapter of your life. There was a moment before it started when you did not know what was coming. Your first step into a new environment, your first serious decision, your first major failure, your first opportunity to begin again. At the time, you probably could not see the full picture. You only saw the next step. That is all you ever truly have, the next step. So don't ask yourself to see 10 years into the future. Ask yourself what happens if you give this opportunity an honest chance. Ask what you might learn. Ask who you might meet. Ask what part of you might grow. Ask whether the person you could become is worth the uncertainty you feel right now. There is also something you should understand about offers like this. An offer is not a promise that everything will be easy. It is an invitation to enter a possibility. The road may still contain difficult days. There may be moments when you question yourself. There may be setbacks. There may be nights when you wonder whether you made the right choice. But a difficult road is not automatically the wrong road. Sometimes the hardest roads lead to the places where we discover our strength. Sometimes struggle teaches us what comfort never could. Sometimes failure becomes the teacher we did not know we needed. The goal is not to build a life without difficulty. The goal is to build a life that means something to you. If you accept, don't expect perfection. Expect movement. Expect learning. Expect moments that challenge your assumptions. Expect to become different from who you are today. And if you refuse, don't punish yourself for it. A decision made honestly is not a failure, but make sure it is honestly yours. Because regret has a strange way of speaking years later. It doesn't always say, you should have succeeded. Sometimes it simply whispers, you should have tried. And that voice can be difficult to silence. Not because trying guarantees success, but because you may never know what could have happened. There are opportunities you can replace. There are others you cannot. Some people leave and never return. Some moments appear once. Some doors close without making a sound. And sometimes you don't realize the significance of a moment until you are looking back at it from years in the future. I don't want you to look back at these 24 hours and wonder what might have happened if you had been brave enough to answer. Be thoughtful, be careful, be honest, but don't let endless analysis become another form of fear. You have permission to choose something different. You have permission to change your mind about who you are. You have permission to stop living according to an old version of yourself. You have permission to take a chance on a future you cannot fully see yet. Maybe this offer represents more than an opportunity. Maybe it represents a turning point. Not because someone else is going to transform your life for you, but because your decision could become the first action in a completely different chapter. And that chapter doesn't need to begin loudly. Real change often begins quietly. One decision, one conversation, one message, one signature, one step, one moment when you finally stop saying someday and decide that today is enough. The clock is moving whether you move or not. That can sound frightening, but it can also be freeing. You don't have to control time. You only have to decide what you do with the time you have. You cannot change yesterday. You cannot guarantee tomorrow. But you can choose what you do with this moment, 24 hours. That's enough time to think, enough time to breathe, enough time to ask the hard questions, enough time to look at the risks, enough time to imagine the possibilities, enough time to listen to the part of you that has been quiet for too long. And when you finally make your decision, stand behind it. If you say yes, don't keep looking backward at the life you left behind. Walk forward and learn. If you say no, don't spend the rest of your life romanticizing the road you didn't take. Accept your decision and keep moving. The important thing is that you choose consciously, because your life is made from moments like this. Not only the dramatic moments people remember, but the quiet decisions nobody sees. The choices made when you are alone. The moments when you decide whether to stay comfortable or step into uncertainty. The moments when you decide whether your fear deserves the final word. Maybe the offer is exactly what you need. Maybe it isn't. I can't promise you the outcome. Nobody can. But I can tell you this, opportunities rarely come with complete certainty attached to them. Sometimes you have to walk toward the unknown, with nothing more than a reason to believe it might be worth it. So take these 24 hours seriously. Not because I am demanding an answer, but because your time is valuable, your attention is valuable, your future is valuable. Don't give this decision away to fear, pressure, pride, or someone else's expectations. Look at the offer clearly. Look at yourself. Look at the future you keep imagining. Then ask yourself one final question, not what is easiest, not what is safest, not what will make everyone else comfortable, but what choice allows you to respect the person you are becoming. The clock will continue. The opportunity will eventually have an answer. And when that moment arrives, let your answer come from clarity rather than fear, from courage rather than pressure, from a genuine understanding of what you want rather than what you think you are supposed to want. You have 24 hours, and sometimes one day is all it takes to change the direction of a life, not because the world suddenly changes, but because you finally decide to stop waiting for permission to take the next step. There is a moment after the decision has been placed in front of you when the noise begins to fade, the questions become quieter, the opinions of other people begin to lose their weight, and for a few seconds you are left alone with the truth of what you actually want. That moment can be uncomfortable because there is nowhere left to hide. You cannot blame the timing. You cannot blame circumstances. You cannot blame someone else for making the choice for you. Eventually, you have to look at yourself and decide whether you are willing to move forward. Maybe you have spent a long time waiting for the perfect opportunity. Maybe you told yourself that one day everything would line up, the right moment would arrive, the right circumstances would appear. You would suddenly feel confident, prepared, and completely certain, but life rarely gives us that kind of certainty. Most meaningful choices arrive while something is still unfinished. You may still have doubts. You may still have responsibilities. You may still have questions that cannot be answered immediately. That does not necessarily mean you should walk away. Sometimes uncertainty is simply the price of entering a new chapter. You have 24 hours to accept my offer, and those 24 hours are not really about proving how quickly you can decide. They are about discovering whether you are ready to stop allowing hesitation to control your future. There is a difference between thinking carefully and thinking endlessly. Careful thinking gives you clarity. Endless thinking creates another circle of doubt. You ask the same question in different ways, hoping eventually the answer will become painless. But some decisions are never painless. Some choices require you to accept that every path carries a cost. If you choose one direction, you leave another behind. That is simply part of being alive. The mistake is believing that you need a choice without sacrifice. You don't. Every meaningful decision asks something from you: time, comfort, familiarity, security, sometimes even the approval of people you care about. And that can be difficult, because there are moments when becoming who you are meant to become requires disappointing the version of you that wanted everything to remain comfortable. Maybe you have always been the person who waits. You wait until everyone agrees. You wait until there is no risk. You wait until someone tells you that you are capable. You wait until you feel completely ready, but waiting can become a habit, and habits can become identities. Eventually, you may start saying, "That's just who I am." But maybe it isn't. Maybe that is simply who you have practiced being. You have practiced hesitation. You have practiced caution. You have practiced expecting the worst. You have practiced putting your dreams somewhere far away because they seem too uncertain to pursue. And the strange thing is that whatever you practice becomes easier. So perhaps this moment is an opportunity to practice something different. Not recklessness, not blind confidence. Courage is quieter than people think. It doesn't always look like a dramatic leap. Sometimes courage is sitting alone and admitting that you want something. Sometimes it is saying yes when your hands are shaking. Sometimes it is saying no when everyone expects you to say yes. Courage is not about pleasing anyone. It is about being honest enough to live with your own decision. That is why I want you to think beyond the 24-hour deadline. Think about the person who will wake up after this decision has been made. Imagine that person 1 year from now. Maybe they are grateful you accepted. Maybe they are grateful you walked away. But what matters is that you don't want that future version of yourself to look backward and realize the decision was made by fear. Fear has a place in your life. It can warn you, it can protect you, it can make you pay attention. But fear should not automatically become the person holding the steering wheel. Sometimes fear tells you to stop when you should simply slow down and look more carefully. Sometimes fear tells you that you are not ready when what it really means is that you are about to do something unfamiliar. And sometimes fear is right. That's why you need honesty. Don't romanticize the offer just because it is an opportunity. Look at it clearly. Understand what it asks from you. Understand what you might gain and what you might lose. Ask the difficult questions, then, after you have looked at everything you can see, listen to what remains, because beneath all the noise, there is usually something simple. You either want to walk through the door or you don't, and there is no shame in either answer. What matters is knowing why. If you accept because you are afraid of missing out, you may regret it. If you reject because you are afraid of failing, you may regret that too. So remove the pressure. Imagine nobody else knows your decision. Imagine nobody will judge you. Imagine there is no applause for saying yes and no criticism for saying no. What would you choose then? That answer may tell you more than 100 opinions ever could. There is another thing you should remember. An opportunity does not have to be perfect to be valuable. Sometimes we reject good opportunities because they don't look exactly like the dream we imagined. We want the perfect conditions, the perfect timing, the perfect guarantee, the perfect beginning, but perfection is often another form of delay. Real life is usually messier. You begin with what you have, you learn as you go, you make adjustments, you make mistakes, you discover strengths you didn't know you had, and slowly something begins to take shape. That is how many of the most important chapters begin, not with certainty, but with willingness. Willingness to learn, willingness to adapt, willingness to accept that you won't know everything at the beginning. You don't need to know the entire road. You only need enough courage to take the next step. And perhaps that is what this offer is really asking from you. Not whether you can predict the future, but whether you are willing to participate in it. Because there is a difference between watching your life happen and choosing to take part in it. You can spend another year thinking about what might happen, or you can take one honest step and discover what actually happens. You can stay exactly where you are because it feels safe, or you can move forward knowing that safety and fulfillment are not always the same thing. The choice is yours, and that is both the frightening part and the beautiful part. Nobody can live this decision for you. Nobody can carry its consequences for you. Nobody can feel the meaning it has inside your own heart. So don't give the responsibility away. Listen to people, learn from them, consider their experiences. But ultimately, return to yourself, because you are the one who has to wake up tomorrow and live with the person you chose to become today. 24 hours may not seem like much, but a single day can hold an extraordinary amount of clarity. One conversation can change your perspective, one realization can change your priorities, one decision can change your direction. You don't need to transform your entire life in one day. You only need to decide what direction you are willing to explore. And maybe that is enough. Maybe the next chapter doesn't need to be perfect. Maybe it just needs to begin. So when the final hours arrive, don't panic. Don't rush simply because the clock is moving. Don't freeze simply because the decision matters. Take a breath. Look at the truth. Look at the opportunity. Look at the person you have been. Then look at the person you are becoming. And ask yourself whether you are willing to meet that person halfway. Because sometimes the greatest risk isn't choosing wrong. Sometimes the greatest risk is never choosing at all. There comes a point when thinking has done all it can do. You have considered the possibilities, imagined the consequences, listened to advice, questioned your instincts, and replayed the decision in your mind more times than you can count. And then, eventually, you reach that quiet place where another question will not give you another answer. You simply have to choose. That is where most people struggle, not because they don't know what they want, but because they are afraid of what wanting something might require from them. Wanting something means accepting that you could lose something else. Wanting change means accepting uncertainty. Wanting a different future means admitting that the present may no longer be enough. And that can be difficult to say out loud. Maybe you have become comfortable with the life you know, even if it isn't the life you imagined. Comfort can be powerful. It gives you routines, familiar faces, familiar places, predictable mornings, predictable nights. You know what tomorrow will probably look like. But sometimes predictability becomes a quiet prison. Nothing is necessarily wrong, but nothing is really moving either. You keep telling yourself that you are grateful for what you have, and you should be. Gratitude matters. But gratitude does not mean you have to stop growing. You can appreciate where you are and still want to go somewhere else. You can love your past and still choose a different future. You can respect the person you were without remaining trapped in the decisions that person made. That is something people often forget. Your past deserves respect, but it does not deserve control over your future. The person you were 5 years ago made choices based on what they knew then. Maybe they were afraid, maybe they were inexperienced, maybe they were simply trying to survive a difficult chapter. You don't have to punish yourself for that. You can learn from that person, and then you can move forward. Maybe this offer is asking you to do exactly that. To move, not because the past was worthless, but because the future is still unwritten. 24 hours, the number sounds small. But imagine what can happen in one day. A conversation can begin, a relationship can change, a decision can be made, a door can open, a direction can shift, a person can finally admit something they have been avoiding for years. Time does not always create change. Sometimes a decision does. And decisions can happen quickly when the truth becomes clear. The difficult part is accepting that there may never be a perfect answer. You may make the right choice and still experience pain. You may choose the wrong path and still discover something valuable. You may accept the offer and later face challenges you never expected. You may refuse it and later wonder what could have happened. There are no guarantees. But perhaps life was never supposed to be about guarantees. Perhaps it is about participation, about showing up, about taking responsibility for your choices, about learning from what happens afterward. You cannot control every outcome, but you can control the honesty behind your decision. That matters, because years from now, you may not remember every detail of this moment, but you may remember whether you trusted yourself. You may remember whether you gave yourself a chance. You may remember whether you allowed fear to make the decision, and that memory can stay with you. So don't ask yourself, what if everything goes wrong? Ask another question. What if something goes right? What if this decision introduces you to a life you never thought possible? What if it teaches you something that changes how you see yourself? What if you discover that you were stronger than you believed? What if the opportunity doesn't give you everything you wanted, but gives you something you desperately needed? Sometimes the value of an opportunity isn't the destination, it is the person you become while walking toward it. You may discover patience, discipline, confidence, humility, resilience, perspective. You may discover that failure isn't the end. You may discover that being uncomfortable does not mean being unsafe. You may discover that you can begin again. And that knowledge can be worth more than the original offer itself. There is also something beautiful about knowing that you have a choice. Not everyone gets the choice they wish they had. Not every door is available. Not every moment can be repeated. So when life gives you a real decision, don't treat it casually. Look at it, hold it carefully, understand it, then decide. Not based on fantasy, not based on fear, based on reality, based on your values, based on what you want your life to represent. Because the goal is not simply to get more, more money, more recognition, more success, more attention. Those things can be useful, but they cannot tell you whether your life has meaning. Meaning comes from knowing why you are doing something, knowing what matters, knowing who you want beside you, knowing what kind of person you want to become. Maybe the offer is connected to all of that. Maybe it represents freedom. Maybe it represents a second chance. Maybe it represents an escape from a situation that no longer fits. Maybe it represents the beginning of something you have quietly wanted for a long time. Only you can know. And that's why the final decision has to belong to you, not your friends, not your family, not strangers, not fear, not pride. There is a strange kind of strength in accepting responsibility for your own life. It means you no longer have to wait for someone else to rescue you. You no longer have to wait for someone else to approve your dreams. You no longer have to explain every choice to everyone. You simply have to understand yourself well enough to choose, and once you choose, accept that the road may not be smooth. There will be difficult mornings, there will be unexpected problems, there will be moments when you question everything. That doesn't automatically mean you made a mistake. Sometimes difficulty is simply difficulty. Don't confuse a hard moment with a wrong direction. Give yourself time to learn. Give yourself permission to adapt. Give yourself permission to be imperfect. You don't need to walk into the future as a finished person. You can grow while you are moving. You can become stronger while you are struggling. You can discover clarity after you begin. Sometimes the path teaches you what the map never could. And maybe that is why this deadline matters, because eventually the waiting has to end. Eventually, you have to leave the room of possibilities and enter the reality of choice. You can keep imagining different futures, or you can begin building one. You can keep asking whether you are ready, or you can decide what being ready means for you. Maybe being ready means understanding the risks. Maybe being ready means accepting that you might fail. Maybe being ready means knowing that you can recover. Maybe being ready simply means refusing to let fear make every decision. There is no universal definition. Your life is not a formula. Your path is not supposed to look like someone else's. You're allowed to choose differently. You're allowed to take the road nobody expected. You're allowed to change direction. And you are allowed to begin again. So when you look at those 24 hours, don't only see a countdown. See a space, a small space in time where you can be honest with yourself. A space where you can ask what matters. A space where you can decide what deserves your energy. A space where you can decide whether the future you want is worth stepping toward. And when the final moment arrives, whatever your answer is, make sure it is yours. If you accept, accept with open eyes. If you decline, decline with peace. But don't spend the next chapter wondering whether you should have been brave enough to make the choice yourself, because there are moments when life doesn't ask for certainty, it asks for courage. And sometimes courage is simply saying, I don't know what happens next, but I'm willing to find out.